matching ideas with resources networking podcast sponsored by GLM. GLM works with business owners on their basic back office, professional business, accounting, strategy, consulting, as much or as little as they want, from basic QuickBooks entry to providing and analyzing financial statements regularly. GLM provides ideas for expense savings and business growth. I'm Tom Ghosh, business strategist with GLM. Well, welcome once again to 10 Minutes with Tom. And today you got 10 minutes with two Toms. So we got Tom Stamborski here. He's with Liquid Capital. He's actually a repeater. We had audio only a couple of years ago when I first started doing this. And Tom agreed to be one of my first guinea pigs on it. Worked out really nice. But there's also been a lot of changes in the last couple of years, both in business and in the world situation. How's it going there, Tom?
Going well. It's busy and certainly a very interesting and challenging period of time that we've dealt with.
Sure. Well, I would always think of you as somebody that can help in factoring, but I know you do a couple of other things as well. Can you talk about your business a little bit?
Well, sure. At Liquid Capital, we provide various forms of alternative finance for typically business-to-business companies, newer companies that have been around for generations across most industries, companies that are facing various financial challenges and, frankly, opportunities, constrained cash flow, ability to be able to pay a supplier to fulfill a purchase order, trying to leverage the assets of their company to create what they call an asset-based line of credit. So we have various strategies dealing with various scenarios that these businesses go through.
That's very good. So when you talk about taking advantage of opportunities, you're talking about a large purchase order that requires some capital that they don't have. Is that one of the scenarios?
It is, and I'll expand on that a little bit as well. Again, what we see is that we have, let's say, a distributor, a company that sells a product manufactured by a third party. Some of those may be manufactured domestically or in many instances overseas. They typically are larger than average orders. It's typically not something that the bank is prepared to finance, but it's a big deal for them as a company in their growth. And they need help paying the supplier so they can fulfill the order and deliver to the customer. And typically this is a fairly meaningful event in the history of their company. Now, one of the things that we are seeing over the last 6 to 8 months is a substantial increase in purchase order transactions with personal protection equipment, or PPE.
Mm-hmm.
I and a lot of my colleagues have been heavily inundated with these type of transactions for the obvious reason that at the beginning of the pandemic, certainly now as we're going through a second stage of the pandemic, now getting ready for vaccinations, the need for equipment, gowns, masks, gloves, needles, syringes, etc., has gone up dramatically. So that, from a category point of view, has been a very, very substantial increase in our overall purchase order activity.
Wow. Well, that just answered my next question, how your business has changed recently. So you've been a significant part of some of these businesses during the pandemic, I assume.
We have, and it's interesting that some of these companies, however, come across some of these very, very large orders, typically probably at least $1 million and going well above that, to fulfill some of these large orders from hospitals, from medical supply, from Department of Defense, from the Army. So it's been significant for a lot of these companies, and some of these companies, or most of these companies, don't have the financial wherewithal to be able to fulfill these orders, but it's critical items that are needed. And so that has been, certainly a manifestation of a change to our business over the last, 8 months, perhaps.
Sure. So how do you do this? Company recognizes this need. They reach out to you. What is some of the process that's involved with all of this?
Well, typically the bulk of my business comes by way of referrals, a lot from commercial lenders, CPA firms, third-party CFOs, consultants, and the like. So I'll be introduced to a prospect, typically through those referral sources. We normally have an initial conversation, get to know about their business, what their situation is, what their challenges are, what their needs are, and then be able to describe to them what we have to offer with our financing programs to see if it's a good fit, If in fact they find this is something that is interesting and helpful, we would start an application process, some initial underwriting and due diligence to see if we can underwrite the transaction. And hopefully that all works out. We would complete our file, do a closing, and then prepare to start funding their specific needs for as long as they need us. And in many instances, we're assisting a bank with a current customer or a newer company that doesn't have bank financing, and the scenarios really vary. But it's really a process of really getting to know the business owner, getting to know the business, trying to understand it at a very high level, and making sure that we can come up with the appropriate solution for them.
And what's the timing on this? Is it usually fairly quick, or is it a long, drawn-out process?
We tend to be, pretty efficient in our overall process. Now, this really kind of is contingent upon that the business owner is responsive and they can provide the documentation and information that we need. To the extent that they can do that on a timely basis, we can move along relatively quickly, where we might start out the initial conversation and be in a position to start funding them in, say, 10 to 15 business days. Some transactions take a little bit longer, but if everybody's cooperative, we can normally do it in that time frame.
Very good. So what do you see happening on the other side of this? Once we've got the vaccine, once we're fairly getting back to normal, do you see your business doing anything differently, or changing in any way?
Well, one of the things that we have seen going through this process is, of course, a lot of companies are very, very challenged financially through this process. Some are in very, very desperate situations, and some are in some very high growth situations. So our underwriting process probably has become a little bit more comprehensive, because everybody in any given industry is affected all the way through the supply chain, from the supplier to the end customer and to our client. So our analysis and ongoing monitoring of the situation is probably a little bit more precise, not so much precise, but more in depth, if you will.
Okay.
And I think going forward, even on the other side of this, as you say, we will probably continue to still have that requirement. Not that we get overly stringent, but we just need to be able to kind of make sure we monitor things carefully, because things can change very, very rapidly. I would say that another thing that may come out of this, that certain companies will have now established themselves in a supply chain situation for the PPE, whereas it started off as kind of a one-off transaction, and now it may be a major component of their business going forward. So I think that'll be probably a longer-term change as far as that part of the industry.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So can you list off just some of the things that you do specifically to help these businesses?
Well, again, it runs the gamut. Typically, we can see situations where people will have constrained cash flow. They have good customers, but the customers, have their own issues. So instead of them paying their invoices on a timely basis, let's say in 30 days, it now starts getting stretched out to 45, 60 days or longer. And of course, that puts a tremendous financial strain on our client.
Right.
So, those constrained cash flow scenarios are very common. There may be situations where they work with a bank, they have a bank line of credit, but the bank can't provide them any more availability because maybe their current financial statements. We can step in and work alongside of the bank to supplement their financing on an interim basis to help the client out. With the PPE situations or purchase order, typically banks are not favorably disposed to that type of transactions, but they're typically very large transactions, which are very critical to the growth of that business. So it really runs the spectrum from tremendous financial stress to extraordinary opportunities and everywhere in between. And every one of those scenarios demands some type of supplemental financing, to help them either, maybe in the worst case scenario, survive. In some instances, really catapult them into a much higher level of growth.
Very good. Is there anything that I missed that you, asking a question, is there anything you wanted to fill in a little bit more?
Well, one of the things is, because I work with so many referral sources and folks that meet with business owners, it's just that to the extent that you hear something in the overall course of conversation that says, I've got good customers, but doggone it, they're taking a long time to pay their invoice, or I came across this very large opportunity and I just don't know how I can finance it. And in some instances, I love my bank, but the bank says, I can't do any more for you. These are all, maybe leading indicators that would give rise to maybe just an initial conversation to see if we can help them. Really, it's nothing more than that. Let's just have a little conversation and see if we might be of assistance to you going forward.
Sounds great. Well, I appreciate you coming on here. I know a lot of the businesses need what you have. So if we do have somebody that would be a good fit for you, your contact information is right below, and then we'll also have it on our blog. So, Tom, I really appreciate your time today. Thank you very much for this interview. Thanks for listening to the Matching Ideas with Resources podcast, sponsored by GLM Financial. I'm Tom Ghosh, business strategist with GLM, steering direction, matching ideas with resources.